The year is 2023, and Ark Survival Evolved has been out for over 8 years now. With 12 official maps released over the course of these years, I thought with ASA on the horizon, there would be no better time to rank all these maps in order of release date. Now, please do keep in mind this video is purely my opinions, but I am more than happy to hear yours in the comments below, so please feel free to voice them in there. Number 1, the Island. Starting out with the map that began it all. The Island was the first map that Ark released with back in 2015, and my god, I don't know whether it's just nostalgia talking here, but what a map it is. The Island of course has undergone many a change since it was first released with the game in 2015. Back then there was no snow biome, no swamp biome, and no underwater caves, just to name a couple of things. And there is no doubt that all of these things have of course significantly helped to bolster the map, especially when you compare it to some of the more recent maps. The Island to me is the most balanced map that Ark has, with just the right level of tough environments, bosses and caves to explore, while also some easier ones. If you don't rush through the game playing on high rates, it will allow you to slowly master the game step by step. And some of the base building spots on this map are just so beautiful. The Hidden Lake, of course showcased in the very first Ark trailer, is still to this day one of the most popular spots and a favourite of mine. For me, the Island is a definitive Ark experience. There are 3 very different bosses to take on, tons of caves to explore, and of course the Overseer and Tech Cave to take on to round it off. If you are a new player and you haven't played Ark before, I cannot stress highly enough how you have to start with this map, and I for one cannot wait to get started on it once more in Ark Survival Ascended. It is ultimately for that reason that the Island is going in the S tier rank. Number 2, the Centre. The Centre. I'll say it now, it's actually my favourite map. An unpopular opinion I'm sure, but I love this map. But I promise to try and look at this from a non-biased point of view. Launched in 2016, the Centre was huge. Like quite a few of the maps to come on this list, the Centre was originally of course a mod map, which then became a free-to-play official Ark map. It cannot be underestimated that this was the first official map launch for Ark, and at a time when people were just starting to get a bit bored of the Island, in came this brand new shiny map to excite everyone again. The Centre is undeniably visually stunning, especially when you consider when this map was released. The map's natural beauty with its waterfalls, lush forests and towering cliffs is a testament to the developers' creativity. Especially at a time when the map was released, it really did offer a lot that the Island just couldn't. It was far better for resources such as cementing paste and had more balanced metal spawns around the map. Locations such as Lava Island and the Underworld are to this day still some of the coolest locations on Ark. I also wanted to say that I do love the soundtrack on the Centre, some truly beautiful themes on here. However, in retrospect, it is probably fair to acknowledge that some of these revolutionary aspects of the Centre are less revolutionary these days. Floating islands, lava islands and underworlds can now all be found on other maps, but I think the Centre deserves a lot of credit for introducing all of these so early into Ark's lifespan. There is of course a Redux mod of the Centre out on the Steam Workshop right now, which actually looks pretty impressive, so it might be worth a look into if you want to play the Centre just before ASA releases. Similarly to the Island, one of the things that I love most about the Centre are the caves. The size of some of these caves are huge. The 2 snow caves in particular stand out to me. Other highlights include the Pearl Cave on Lava Island and the whole jumping puzzle area, which features great loot, a water cave and just a huge area to explore in general. Areas such as the Underworld Cave as well, which while might not have an artifact in them, offer great building spots for smaller tribes on PvP. It is why the map has always maintained a committed PvP player base, despite for so many years it being terrible to farm element on. In conclusion, I still think despite its age, the Centre makes a compelling choice for those seeking fresh adventures in the world of Ark, and whether you're a seasoned survivor or newcomer to the game, the Centre is definitely worth exploring. For that reason, I'm giving it an A, and of course, cannot wait to play this map once more, once the new game comes out. Number 3, Scorched Earth. The first paid official DLC. Released in 2016, this caused quite the storm. This was of course because Wildcard had decided to release a DLC, while the main game was still in early access and far from a polished product. But all that doesn't really matter when we're discussing the map itself. Scorched introduced Ark's first desert biome and decided to make a map out of it. The map released with a plethora of new dinos, such as wyverns, rock golems, mantises, and all of these were huge in 2016, with Scorched being the only place to get these at the time. However, as time has gone on, this of course is no longer the case, with the Phoenix being the only exclusive creature to Scorched Earth. Starting out on Scorched is a difficult process, mainly due to the heat and harsh wild dino spawns. However, I do find it quite a rewarding process, and I think the early game is quite a good time on this map, although it's probably not the best for someone new to the game. However, one of my main problems with Scorched is that once you climb up the ranks and get yourself that first wyvern, the map suddenly doesn't become much of a challenge. The map only has 3 artifact caves in, and while I can appreciate how beautiful these caves are, they can soon be completed or ran on pretty much any dino. The Scorched Earth Ascension added last year does help to flesh out the map a little bit, but at the end of the day, all you really get is some extra levels and a couple of nice cutscenes. I think in comparison to some of the other maps on this list, I don't think Scorched Earth has aged terribly well, and that is why I'm going to be placing Scorched Earth in the C tier. Number 4, Ragnarok. And the reason why Scorched Earth became slightly irrelevant so soon is because of the next map on this list, the timeless classic that is Ragnarok. When Ragnarok launched in 2017, as a complete surprise out of the blue, it took the Ark world by storm. Both the PvE and PvP bases flocked over to this map, which dwarfed all other maps in terms of its size, base locations, and sheer amount of dinos on offer. The addition of mini-bosses such as the Lava Golem and Ice Worm Queen, which gave some great loot, was such a neat addition. But the main thing Ragnarok did right out of the bat was make Scorched Earth a pretty irrelevant map. Every Scorched Earth creature, including wyverns, was obtainable on Ragnarok, which meant that you didn't even have to buy the paid DLC anymore to gain access to these creatures. Of course, most people by this point already probably own Scorched Earth, but Ragnarok quickly became the most popular map for people to play, as it was seen as the complete Ark experience, with everything obtainable on a singular map. Still to this day, I see Ragnarok as one of the greatest Ark maps, and of course subsequent updates after the release helped to add to this. I'm confident that once this releases on Ark Survival Ascended and the entire new player base gets to experience this map, they will fall in love with it all over again, or maybe for the first time. For me, Ragnarok is an easy S tier, so that is where I'm going to be placing it on this tier list. Number 5, Aberration. Next up, we have perhaps the most polarizing Ark map, both at the time of its release and probably still to this day. Yet, I think over the years, Aberration has gained a few more fans. At the time of its release, I have no shame in admitting that I hated it. It was simply too hard. It wasn't the Ark experience that I was used to. Like seriously, what were these mushrooms on the floor that kept killing me? There's no doubt that Aberration is one of the harder Ark maps. In fact, for new players, I would have it down as the hardest. However, once you learn the ropes, understand the different biomes and creatures, the map becomes a genuinely enjoyable experience. Not to flex or anything, but I did recently beat this map without taking a single speck of damage, and it was one of the most rewarding feelings that I've felt in gaming, and I actually found myself enjoying the challenge. This map is undoubtedly gorgeous, and I think it's probably the map that people are most excited to see on Unreal Engine 5 when it gets released in Ark Survival Ascended later down the line. My main memory of Aberration from its launch is how much it changed the game in terms of metal farming. The days of Quetzal and Ankis were over in a flash, as if you could brave the blue zone, metal was everywhere. It became the best farming map, not just for metal, but also for resources such as organic polymer, and I think this really allowed it to stay relevant throughout the whole Ark cycle pretty much. If I was to level a criticism at this map though, I would say that the map is extremely difficult for your average Ark player, until you manage to get yourself a Rock Drake egg. Once you do get yourself a Rock Drake egg, I would then say that it becomes too easy, with most of the challenges of this map no longer simply challenging. I wasn't quite sure where I was going to put Aberration, but I've decided to put it as a high B. I think that official paid DLCs should be held to a slightly higher standard than the creator release maps, so despite this, I am looking forward to playing this once more in the years to come. Number 6, Extinction. Extinction. What a mess of a launch this was. I remember the constant delays Extinction went through before release, even launching some 8 hours late on the actual day of release, and yes, I know this because I stayed up until 4 AM in the morning to fly around this map and scout it all out. This map at launch was interesting, let's say. PvP wise, it was absolutely broken. Mechs which could damage structures out of turret range, ridiculously overpowered titans, and Manigamas are only a selection of the things that Extinction introduced that was completely broken. I'm quite torn on this map personally. I think it introduced a lot of good things despite its very shaky launch. So I'll firstly say this, I do like this map. I'm a huge fan of the orbital supply drops. I think they were a very neat addition and made leveling up dinos fun and a rewarding activity, as the loot you could get from the purple drops in particular was well worth it. I think the sunken forest area of the map is very pretty, and there are some really nice base locations that you can live on there, and the same can be said for the city area. The King Titan fight is also a very unique boss fight, and something that is a completely different experience to the standard boss fights which you get on other maps, something that I did actually appreciate. I will say though, I think it's quite lame that you don't get any engrams or extra levels for defeating him. Of course, Extinction also introduced cryopods, which overall were a great addition to the game. Ark have just announced that cryos will not be in Ark Survival Ascended at the start, and I actually am in favour of that, but I'm still looking forward to them being added in the years to come. There is a lot to say on Extinction, and a lot of debate to be had on whether it was almost the beginning of the end for classic Ark. In comparison to what is to come, however, I will take Extinction every day of the week. Similarly to Aberration, I'm going to rank Extinction as a high B tier map. Number 7, Valguero. Next up, we have Valguero. Following in the footsteps of the centre, Ragnarok, Valguero was originally a created mod map before it became an official map, launching in the summer of 2019. It did introduce Deinonychus, which in a similar fashion to wyvern eggs or rock drake eggs, you would steal from their eggs from nests. Now, this isn't a map I've explored as much as I'd have liked to. I've spent time over here collecting Deinonychus eggs and an awful lot of time in the locations of the Oil Cave and the Aberration Zone. Both of these locations became a mainstay in the PvP community and kept Valguero relevant. As other maps suffered from a lack of strong buildable spots, Valguero actually flourished. This is one of the Ark maps that I haven't explored to its full potential, so I'm not going to waffle on about it too much more, as I don't think that would be fair. I do think it's an impressive testament that Valguero managed to stay relevant throughout the entire lifespan of Ark Survival Evolved, and for that reason alone, I think the map is worth at least a high B, which is where I'm going to be placing it in this tier list. Number 8, Genesis Part 1. Now, here are where things start to get interesting. With the release of Genesis Part 1, we entered the Genesis era of Ark Survival Evolved, and it wasn't particularly a change I liked, to be honest. Now, that doesn't mean I hate every single mission on these maps. Hell, I actually quite liked them. During my Genesis 1 100 Days at Sarkos, I had an absolute ball of the time throwing dodos into basketball hoops and playing a rip-off Wave Race 64 while riding on the back of a manta. Yet the Genesis era was a change that I didn't particularly welcome. A combination of the required missions to take on the final boss, the teleporting to different biomes, huge portions of the map being unbuildable, meant it just wasn't for me, who looks for a more primitive classic Ark experience. While we are talking about missions, we have to talk about the crazy loot that you can get from doing them. This was obviously added to give extra incentive for people to grind and replay the missions, to build up a supply of set loot, as each mission offers something completely different loot-wise. I can respect that by this point Ark needed to evolve, and add in elements that made the game less grindy, so that seasoned pros could come back and not get burnt out too quickly. This is where elements such as the mission loot and the addition of the new Metal Gods magma saws were successful. I will add that I do like a lot of the new creatures in Gen 1, including the magma saws and feroxes. It's also probably important to mention that the Master Controller boss fight here is an incredibly difficult fight, especially on beta and alpha, and even with the help of friends, there really is no guarantee that you will succeed. I actually don't mind the scaling though, as I think the final fight should be tough, so the map doesn't lose any points for me there. However, one thing that it does lose points for is how unbelievably difficult some of those latter missions are. If you are playing with a group of friends, you could argue that some of these missions give you something to strive for, and represent a real challenge to complete the map and Ascend. However, for any solo or single player players, there is no balancing whatsoever. Some of the missions are point blank impossible to do by yourself, and the fact that there's still nothing has been altered for this and changed to this day isn't a great look. Overall, I find Ark Genesis Part 1 to be a mixed bag, offering both exciting additions and frustrating drawbacks. While the expansion does bring new life to the Ark universe, I can't say I thought most of these changes were good. The missions could have been a fun side mode, in the same way that orbital supply drops were in Extinction, but to make them compulsory to progress in this map was not for me. I could probably write a video essay on the Genesis maps and why they weren't for me, but for now, I'll just tell you all that I placed Genesis Part 1 as a high C tier map in my tier list. Number 9, Crystal Isles. On to our next map, which was of course Crystal Isles, another mod map becoming official free DLC in August of 2020. Crystal Isles is a slightly strange map for me, and there are certainly elements of this map that I do like. It has the feel of a classic older Ark map such as the island or the centre, and there could be no doubting that visually this map does look absolutely stunning. I think it might be the best Ark looking map on Survival Evolved, and if not, it's certainly up there. Crystal Isles does add several new creatures such as the Tropoganthus, and of course the Crystal Wyverns, which were a pretty cool addition to the game. It also hosts a Griffin Trench where you can find plenty of high level Griffins in abundance. Honestly, there is quite a lot of positive things to say about this map. A map which I originally had little interest in playing when it first came out. A major thing that I think Crystal Isles deserves major props for is being the first free DLC map to have an original boss, as opposed to reusing old bosses and just making a new arena. So what are the negatives of this map? Well, the artifact placement is a bit of a strange one for me. Instead of having to navigate caves to get artifacts, the majority of artifacts in Crystal Isles could just be found out in the open. There are a few exceptions to this rule of course, but I did always find this a bit odd. Caves for me are a huge part of the Ark experience, which is one reason that I am such a big fan of maps such as the island and the centre, as I thoroughly enjoyed the caving experience on both those maps. This does however give Crystal Isles a plus point for the PvP community, as this was always a good map to collect artifacts quickly for any boss fights on different maps, as they were always quick and easy to get. A last point to make is that as with many of the mod maps, Crystal Isles suffered from the post-production wildcard treatment, where the official release stripped back a lot of the content and vision by the original mod maker. Lots of tames were removed from the final phase, and the verdict from those that played the mod map before the official release was that it made the map feel far more barren than the final release. I do have conflicted feelings about Crystal Isles. I think the core map is solid and does a lot right, but perhaps it released at an unfortunate time where a lot of its best features couldn't quite be appreciated enough. I am interested to see if this map will make its way to ASA, as I do think that the map looks absolutely incredible and would love to see what they could do with it on the new engine. After a little bit of internal debate, I decided that I'm going to place Crystal Isles in the C tier of this list. Number 10. Genesis Part 2. The last official DLC of Ark 1, and I'll be honest, I didn't like it. Genesis Part 2 to me felt extremely rushed, which of course was illustrated when the map released to numerous bugs and glitches. As a big fan of early game Ark, I wasn't a particular fan of the tech suit powers granted to you the moment you spawn in, but as I have already mentioned in this video, I was accepting of the need for the game to evolve as the story maps went on. This doesn't mean that I was a fan of how easy resources like elements or basically anything were to get early doors in this map. I vividly remember at the time of Genesis Part 2's release, I was playing on official PvP with a lot of my core friends. I had commitments during the day, so I popped on a few hours after release. Upon joining Discord, I was told that we had already got 2000 element after only a couple of hours of playtime. PvP wise, I think this map was a bit of a nightmare, with some crazy balancing issues, especially when you compare it to the other maps. Genesis 2 also, of course, brings back the compulsory missions that Genesis 1 did, and I'm not sure if I prefer them or just like the whole structure more. Missions wise, I actually think that a lot of the missions in Genesis Part 2 are pretty good. Some of the missions, such as Survive the Ark or Code Red, are actually quite a blast to play through with friends, and playing through Genesis 2 did make me appreciate how the missions give you something more streamlined to strive for. However, what I didn't like about the missions on Genesis Part 2 is that you have to do all of them to do the final boss, which of course is Rockwell Phase 2. I liked in Part 2 that if you didn't do a certain mission, I didn't have to. I could simply move on to the next one and complete that one instead. Here, there is a much more linear progression, forcing you to complete every single mission before you can ascend. If you're playing with a group of 4 or 5 friends, I think that you can potentially have fun with this, as a lot of the missions in Genesis Part 2 are designed for exactly this. However, for a solo player, just like Genesis Part 1, I think this whole process is incredibly tedious and unrewarding. The general map of Genesis Part 2 is also a sore point for me. The two main large biomes just feel like huge barren lands, with nothing of note to stop for while you zoom over them in your tech suit. The map is undeniably huge, but when it feels like little love or creativity is actually put into it, it just makes the whole map just feel completely empty, which is no more obvious than if you were playing on single player or on a low population server. I don't actually think that no love was put into this map, I just think that Wildcard didn't have enough time to properly execute their final vision for Ark Survival Evolved, which is a shame, as I think it deserved a better official send-off than we got. Like I mentioned earlier, I feel that I could probably go on and on about the Ark Genesis maps for quite some time, but I'll stop here and announce where I'm putting Part 2 in my tier list. I'm going to be putting Genesis Part 2 in the C tier, along with its younger brother. Both of these maps have different things that I like about them and different things that I don't like, and ultimately, I feel that they both belong together. Number 11. Lost Island. With the last official DLC now done, we move on to the penultimate Ark Survival Evolved map, which was Lost Island. Lost Island was a strange one, as when it was announced only 10% of the map was actually completed, with Wildcard showing a lot of faith in the development team to push out a great final product. For the most part, I think they did this. I feel that Lost Island and Crystal Isles are great examples of why Ark really needed an update to Unreal Engine 5, as the developers tried to push the software to the limit in order to make a map that felt fresh and rewarding, and ultimately struggling to do so. Lost Island launched with 3 new creatures, which were all pretty cool, with the Amargasaurus, Cinemacrops and Dinopithecus all offering completely different things. It also offers a surprising amount of DLC creatures that are tameable on it, which is a pretty nice addition as both Crystal Isles and Valguero had suffered from certain creatures getting cut from the final release. One area that I particularly like of Lost Island is the jungle biome, as it feels detailed and well done, with a lot of love put into it. I do just feel that mod maps were always going to struggle to get that wow factor at the stage in this game's lifespan. With so many maps to choose from, it was always going to be hard for it to stand out, in the same way that the Center or Ragnarok could do back in the day, and I think that Lost Island is a map put together with a lot of love and passion. I will give this map some great credit for its caves. Some of the caves on this map are beautifully put together, which after Crystal Isles was quite a big relief to me. They are great to explore and I enjoyed taking a look around them. Ultimately for me though, Lost Island just wasn't something that got me all too excited. It felt like more of the same. It had become crystal clear to me that the possibilities had been stretched to the utmost when it came to the creativity that these map creators had. With this thought process in mind, I am going to rank Lost Island as a low B tier map. And finally, our final map, map number 12, Fjordur. Last but not least, we have Fjordur, a map released in June of 2022, which had an impact that no free DLC had had since Ragnarok, released all the way back in 2017. Fjordur arguably proves a lot of my previous points about Lost Island to be redundant, as it included so many new and exciting features into one large expansive map. As well as the main world, Fjordur offers 3 realms to travel to, in Jotunheim, Vanaheim and Asgard. All of these offer completely different things, such as exclusive wyvern scars limited to one type, as well as unique world bosses. These world bosses are summoned by runestones collected by killing alpha creatures, and in total, including the world bosses, there are 7 main bosses to fight on Fjordur, which adds an insane amount of depth and replayability to this map. There isn't much that Fjordur doesn't offer, and in 2023, as we prepare to close down from Ark Survival Evolved, after the island, I think this map might be the next map I would recommend people to play next. I think what I'm really trying to say here is that Fjordur was an amazing final map for Ark Survival Evolved, and I really hope that it does come over to ASA one day. I do actually want to make this point while we're on the subject of maps, that I don't believe that every single map from Ark Survival Evolved should automatically qualify to be ported over. We want ASA to feel like a fresh experience, and while reliving the island in all of its glory in what we're hoping to be a stunning visual upgrade, this will get old pretty fast. Fjordur, however, along with Ragnarok and the Centre, has to be included for me. Let's see what ASA brings anyway, and to get back to the tier list, I am going to place Fjordur down as an S-rated map. It truly is a great experience, and was a fantastic send-off for Ark Survival Evolved. So there we have it, all Ark maps ranked. This is the final tier list that I put together, but please remember that this is just my opinion. However, I would absolutely love to hear yours in the comments below, so please do feel free to express your opinion below there. This may or may not be my last video before Ascended releases, so if it is, I just want to say thank you all so much for your support on Survival Evolved. It's been a crazy journey so far, and I cannot wait for more to come. As always, look after yourselves guys, and I will catch you in the next one.
Drugs that you're taking are killing your soul. Baby, you gotta let go. The drugs that you're taking